The 2025 World Junior Championship had everything. We saw players who nobody knew quickly become household names, while others had their entire country turn against them. It featured the biggest rivalries on the biggest national stage, which made for some of the most intense games of the World Juniors we've ever seen. We saw major upsets, last-minute heroics, heartbreaking defeats, and record-breaking performances. This World Junior Championship delivered unforgettable moments, making it one of the most memorable tournaments in its history, and it deserves a deep dive. The actual tournament started on December 26th, the day after Christmas, and had the best U20 players from the 10 best nations of hockey. In Pool A, we had the USA, Finland, Canada, Latvia, and Germany. And in Pool B, we had Sweden, Czechia, Slovakia, Switzerland, and the newly promoted Kazakhstan, who had won the Division 1A tournament to book their ticket to Ottawa. The tournament started with a bang as Axel Sandin Pellikka recorded a hat trick in the first game of the tournament as Sweden started their gold medal journey. They entered the tournament as heavy favorites in their group and were widely regarded as one of the top contenders for the gold medal, with many viewing it as a three-team tournament between Canada, Sweden, and the States. And day one followed that trend as the USA put a beat down on Germany and Canada shut out a very strong Finland team. These preliminary games are where underdogs can surprise everyone and top teams try and prove why they're the best. Every game matters, and the results help shape the story of the tournament, and one major upset could shake how the entire group finishes. We saw exactly that in day 2 of the preliminaries as Latvia stunned the host country in a 3-2 shootout victory. This is the first time in the tournament's history that Latvia had beaten Canada, and it was highlighted by the Latvian goaltender Feldbergs, who had an unreal performance. He stopped 55 out of 57 shots, along with all 8 of Canada's shootout attempts. And as big of a win it was for Latvia, it was an even bigger loss for Canada. Going into the tournament, Canada had something to prove, not just because they were the host country and it's Canada, but it's because Canada's management was heavily scrutinized going into the tournament, as fans thought they left out some pretty big names in Canadian hockey. They missed out on top defensive picks like Zane Parekh and Carter Yakimchuk, and they missed on some high-powered offensive players like Tiji Ginla, Beckett Seneca, and Michael Misa. And given Canada's struggles and the fact that they only scored 2 goals across regulation, overtime, and the shootout against Latvia, it's hard not to think that with just a little bit more offensive power, they would have come out on top. But instead, Latvia shocked the hockey world, and they continued to do so by beating Germany in overtime to win their second game in the tournament for the first time in history, clinching a spot in the quarterfinals. But this created a complicated situation in Pool A. USA beat Latvia, Latvia beat Canada, Canada beat Finland, but Finland beat the USA and Latvia. So the final game of the prelim round between Canada and the States would decide who would come out on top of the group. The game was tied, but after that, it was all United States. They put up 3 more goals to win the game 4-1, clinching the top seed, followed by Finland, Canada, Latvia, and Germany. Since Germany finished last in the group, they would play in the relegation game against the bottom seed of Group B to figure out who would get bounced from the tournament for next year's World Juniors. But to figure out who they had to face in that relegation game, the rest of Pool B had to play out. Sweden had a perfect 4-0 record, followed by Czechia, who went pretty much perfect besides, well, a loss to Sweden, and Slovakia and Switzerland pretty much had the same tournament, allowing almost the same amount of goals and scoring almost the same amount. But in the end, Slovakia would finish ahead of them because of their 2-1 win on the second day at the tourney. And the odd duck out was Kazakhstan, who did not have a fun time during that preliminary round. They lost all of their games. Granted, one was in overtime, but they had a -22 goal differential through 4 games, including an 8-1 pummeling by Sweden and a just disrespectful 14-2 loss to Czechia. Their one bright spot though was their goaltender Vladimir Nikitin, who was their only NHL prospect on the entire team. That though wasn't enough, as they fell to Germany 4-3 in the relegation round, putting them out of the top division just as quickly as they got promoted to it. Now, with the preliminary games and the relegation round over and done with, it's time for the real fun to start, the quarterfinals. The matchups were set: USA versus Switzerland, Canada versus Czechia, Sweden versus Latvia, and Finland versus Slovakia. The US-Swiss game went on just about as you expected. The last Swiss medal came in 1998 where they won bronze, and since then they've only finished above 6th place 5 times. And on the other hand, you had the defending world champions. USA did make quick work of Switzerland as they won 7-2 and secured their spot in the semifinal. And although this was a blowout and that was expected, the rest of the quarterfinal games did not go that way. Finland started strong against Slovakia, taking a 3-0 lead in the first period. Slovakia fought back with 2 goals of their own in the second and the third, but Finland managed to keep control. Despite Slovakia outshooting them 38-18, the Finns held on to win this one with major help to their goaltender, Petteri Rimponen, who was pretty much the Finns' MVP the entire tournament. This was a step closer to Finland's 6th gold medal, but that extended Slovakia's medal drought to 10 years. All eyes were on the Sweden-Latvia game as everyone was watching to see if Latvia would continue their Cinderella story. They already had their miracle moment, so to repeat it against Sweden was a huge ask. Sweden took a 2-0 lead after they scored 2 goals in the span of about a minute in the first period. Then early in the second, they made their lead 3, and it was looking like this game was all done. But the Latvian hero against Canada, Eriks Matejko, came back with 2 goals of his own to cut the lead to 1. This wasn't enough though. Feldbergs tried his best, stopping 47 out of 50 Swedish shots, but the Latvians just couldn't score another and lost the game 3-2, ending their tournament. But even though they lost and they got heavily outplayed in almost every game, this was undeniably the best tournament in their country's history, taking down Canada, winning 2 preliminary games for the first time ever, then only losing to Sweden, one of the top dogs, by just a goal. The Canada-Czechia game was probably the most entertaining game at this round of the tournament, and that's because it was the host country versus the team that put them out last year in the quarterfinals. Canada showed some offensive improvement, but ultimately lost to Czechia 4-3, as Adam Jeko scored a power play goal with under 40 seconds left to seal the victory for the Czechs. It was yet another tough loss for Canada, who were also upset by the Czechs in the dying moments at the same stage 12 months ago. 2 5th-place finishes in a row for Canada is unheard of, but in hindsight, this was sort of expected. For one, they left off immense talent like I said, shut down defensemen that would help keep their pucks out of the net, and elite offensive players that would put the puck in the net. And even with the players they did have, head coach Dave Cameron consistently failed to put out the right ones. And the #1 red flag for this team is that on the day following Canada's loss to Latvia, they didn't practice. The day after losing to the US, they didn't practice. And on the game day in a do-or-die matchup against Czechia, they didn't practice. The excuse for this? Well, Dave Cameron says that there's no system for tired hockey players. Well, there's also no system when you don't practice at all. So with pretty much no practice this entire tournament, it was almost obvious that Canada would lose this quarterfinal game. Now, the game was exciting as it was close in score, but the tensions were also high almost the entire game because of a knee-on-knee collision that happened 10 minutes into the first period, as Verdin tried to line up Peter Sikora but missed the target and connected with his knee instead. This left Sikora on the ice in pain for multiple minutes, but what sent Canadians spiraling was that it was Sikora who assisted on the game-winning goal. He instantly became an enemy and was booed every single time he touched the puck. And this bled into the semi-final game against the United States. But before that game was played, Sweden and Finland would play in what ended up being an amazing game. After a scoreless first period, Finland took charge, outshooting the Swedes 20-10 throughout the second and taking a 3-2 lead in that time. The tides turned though in the third period as Sweden outshot Finland 20-3 in that period, but only scored 1 goal to tie it as the Finnish goalie Rimponen put on a masterclass to send this game to overtime. Sweden dominated overtime for a bit, but eventually Finland was sent to the power play, and after a bad angle shot, the game was over.
With Kupalainen fighting for space in front. Scores!
This is definitely a goal that Sweden's goalie Palin would want back, but it was a smart shot and Finland books themselves a finals appearance. USA vs Czechia was a bit less even of a game as the states sort of just dismantled the Czechs. Goals were going in easy and it was clear that USA was a better team. Although Czechia did put up a strong fight in the third period, the Americans held on to earn the chance to repeat as champions with a 4-1 win. And now 10 days after this tournament had started, just 4 teams remain. Sweden and Czechia would fight for the bronze, as USA and Finland would fight for the gold. The bronze medal game was a dogfight with goals going in back and forth, and at the end of 1, the game was tied at 1, and at the end of 2, the game was tied at 2. Then with a scoreless third period, the game would head to a 10-minute overtime period. Teams traded chances in overtime, but still nothing was resolved. So we went to a shootout. And just how the entire game had gone, these teams traded shootout shots. Both missed their first attempts, and then both scored their second attempts, with Sandin Pellikka continuing his dominance with this nasty move.
Sandin Pellikka scores! Whoa.
They then went scoreless for a while until round 13, where Stenberg would break the silence, which looked like it would be the winner considering how rock solid the goaltenders were, but Chalet scored to extend the shootout. Sweden sent out Stenberg again because, according to international rules, after the first 5 shots, you can use whoever you want as many times as you want. And he came down and he would hit the post, giving Czechia their 8th chance to win the game, and Chalet did just that, giving the Czechs the bronze medal after the longest shootout in double IHF history. This would also be the 3rd straight year where Czechia would medal. And then this would set the stage for the gold medal game, which was full of intense moments. A team that was trying to go back-to-back for the first time in their country's history versus the only team to beat them in the past 2 years. Finland opened the scoring with a power play rip from Kiskinen, but a goal from Hagens tied it up. Just a minute after the US tied it though, Euronen walked in and put it past Augustin for a 2-1 lead. Then early in the second period, Pieniemi sniped it to give Finland a commanding 3-1 lead, and at this point, it was looking pretty bleak for the Americans. But a switch just flipped. They got one back on a lucky bounce, and then just a minute later, with 30 seconds left in the period, Cole Hudson tied the game. After the Finns' 3rd goal, the Americans played an entirely new game and took control of it. The 3rd period was uneventful with each team trading chances, but the game would end up going to overtime. There's really nothing better than a gold medal overtime game. So many legendary moments have happened at this stage, and whoever would score next would create a legacy. The Finns were looking for their 6th gold medal, and the Americans were looking for their 7th and their first back-to-back. The momentum carried over for the USA as they had so many looks in overtime. This puck barely bounces over the stick. Rimpinen absolutely robbed Boyum, and Leonard almost had the goal of the tournament, but it was again stopped by Rimpinen. At this point, the Finns were just holding on for dear life as the Americans kept pressing and Rimpinen kept coming up huge. Then Boyum springs Teddy Stiga on a breakaway, and the game was on the stick of a bottom 6 forward who had just played a little over 9 minutes that game.
Captain, come for your cup.